However, the deception cost them more than $127,000 in union and court fines. That sum was taken directly from Valerie's future earnings. Lear saw more than simply Valerie's talent. He recognized it. He urged her to appear as though her character's parents were divorcing during her last screen test on March 22. She broke down in tears, actual tears. Nobody was aware that at the time, her own parents were privately thinking about getting a divorce. Lear recognized something wrong in her from his own early years. She had the same ghostly appearance that he had seen in the mirror as a child, he wrote later. A peculiar connection was formed between them at that instant. Lear grew unduly defensive. She was perceived by several cast members as receiving preferential treatment. It wasn't favoritism, though. It was acknowledgement. She reminded him of himself. Valerie was only 15 when the show debuted in December 1975. She rose to become one of television's youngest lead actresses. Valerie was earning thousands per episode, while other children were working summer jobs for $210 an hour. For prom outfits, most teenagers saved money. Fans from all around the nation were sending Valerie fan mail. Freedom, however, was not renown. It was a cage. From 1975 to 1984, she was Barbara Cooper for 9 years, and Barbara Cooper was consistently happy, resilient, and flawless. That was a role Valerie had to perform both on and off screen. She felt more and more ensnared by the character that everyone else adored as the show gained popularity. The show was a tough one behind the scenes. It addressed divorce, financial difficulties, loneliness, and other issues that deeply affected Valerie. She was indeed going through those difficulties. She had to grin on film despite her family's quiet disintegration. She was forced into emotional territory she didn't fully comprehend with each episode. Nevertheless, she had no choice except to deliver. Bonnie Franklin, her co-star, took on the role of a second mother. However, it wasn't always simple. Franklin kept a close eye on Valerie. Her clothing, her weight, and even her romantic partners. Valerie was unable to rebel like a typical adolescent. She couldn't afford to make a mistake in public. Franklin sent her to treatment when she eventually confided in him that she felt like she was crumbling. Yes, it was chilly, but it was caring. They treated Valerie's breakdowns like production set issues. Fixable, controllable, but never genuinely intimate. Another casualty was her schooling. According to California law, child actors are only needed to attend school for 3 hours each day. Valerie received the bare minimum. She missed graduation, prom, and all the things that teens take for granted. Valerie was memorizing scripts and posing for cameras while her classmates were learning to drive and chatting in the hallways. She didn't have the life of a teenager for 9 years. She led the life of a television character. She also had to retrain herself to be authentic when the show finished. She was wealthy by her late teens, but she didn't feel liberated. Barbara Cooper was content. Bertinelli. Valerie wasn't. The world adored the person she was posing as, and every paycheck served as a reminder of that. She also became increasingly disconnected from her true self the longer it persisted. Her love tale came next. August 1980 was the beginning of it all. At the age of 20, Valerie Bertinelli was already well known for her program One Day at a Time. 25 was Eddie Van Halen's age. Rock stages around the nation are being illuminated by the crazy guitarist. Backstage at a Van Halen show in Shreveport, Louisiana, they got to know one another. When Eddie saw Valerie, he stopped talking to someone else in the middle of his sentence. He abruptly ended the chat and approached her directly. For months, he had kept a clipping of her from a magazine in his wallet. He repeatedly declared to his fellow musicians that he would wed that girl. He had previously attempted to get backstage at her TV tapings, but security sent him away. Eddie was so anxious and high on cocaine that he could hardly talk when they eventually met. He had trembling hands. He continued to touch his nose. He was still able to ask her out. Not everything was love at first sight. Obsession was the cause. Coming to life at last. It was not an ordinary first date. At 2 p.m., they met at a coffee shop in West Hollywood and didn't depart until 10 o'clock, 8 hours. Most of the talking was done by Eddie. He admitted everything, drank cup after cup of coffee, and chain smoked. He informed her that he had been enjoying her images and TV guide for more than a year. He talked of having specific fantasies about their future, including where they would reside and the number of children they would have. He even acknowledged using cocaine to relax just before they met. For now, Valerie couldn't decide if she should be flattered, laugh, or run. She had never been so much in demand. The guitar then appeared. Eddie sang a song he wrote about her on a little acoustic he had brought. He sang about her smile and how she made him feel alive before they had ever met. It was too much. Eddie proposed in April 1981. Only 8 months later, he purchased a personalized diamond ring in the shape of a guitar pick for $25,000. But there was anarchy behind the gesture. For 3 days, he had not slept. He was paranoid and high. Before he got on his knees, he made Valerie check all the windows and doors. More than an hour was spent on the suggestion. Eddie continued to stray into bizarre tirades about the music business and malevolent powers out to destroy it. Even worse, he was unable to select a single ring. He instructed her to choose the one that spoke to her soul out of the 3 he had purchased. It was not romantic. It was unsettling. On April 11, 1981, they were married in a large Westwood church. Stars everywhere, 400 guests. Over 100 guests. Over $100,000 was spent on the event, or about $350,000 now. However, the fairy tale quickly fell apart. Eddie couldn't recall his vows since he was so inebriated. He had to use a crumpled piece of paper to read them. Later on in her career, Valerie acknowledged that she almost quit. Eddie then said something in a whisper that broke her heart during their first dance. Before he walked down the aisle, he told her that he had just used cocaine in the church restroom. He then inquired whether she would also want some. She might be seen grinning in their wedding pictures. It wasn't joy, though. It was a shock. The honeymoon hardly lasted 4 days. They traveled to Hawaii by air. Valerie had dreamed of sunsets and walks on the beach. Rather, Eddie was either locked in the restroom or passed out most of the time. His guitar case contained more than $3,000 worth of cocaine that he had smuggled. Valerie discovered him unconscious and with a bleeding nose on the 3rd day. She needed to make a hotel security call. He accused her of adultery with hotel personnel once he regained consciousness. About conspiracies, he yelled. He was hostile and paranoid. She discovered that he had been using cocaine every day for more than 2 years prior to their first encounter. She fell in love with a fake man. He was the drug-shaped variant. The following 20 years were turbulent. Eddie's addiction continued to deteriorate. He took a sip, he smoked, he used narcotics all the time. Valerie made an effort to assist. She made an effort to comprehend, but to no avail. She was crumbling in private. I never despised him, she once remarked, but I detested the drugs and the alcohol. She was only 21 when they got married, and I could see his suffering. The emotional burden of loving an addict was too much for her to handle. Eddie cheated too. The marriage began to fall apart. Since then, Valerie has acknowledged that she mentally rewrote their past after Eddie passed away, gave it a more romantic sound than it actually had. However, the truth continued surfacing. She claimed that there was only chaos and no true love, caring, or support. At the height of Eddie's addiction, they lost a pregnancy. Their pain was compounded by their grief. By 1991, when their son Wolfgang was born, their relationship was already severely damaged. On her own, Valerie struggled. Her career came to a standstill after One Day at a Time concluded in 1984. She had 2 sitcoms, Sydney and Cafe Americana, which were abruptly canceled, and she appeared in tiny TV films. She accepted any roles that came her way for years. Things became more difficult once she and Eddie split up in 2001. She made no request for child support or alimony. They just decided to split Wolfgang's expenses. But she was quickly running out of money. Jobs were hard to come by while she was in her 40s. She then started representing Jenny Craig as a spokesperson. It was more than just weight loss. It was a matter of survival. Valerie struggled with more than money behind closed doors. Her sense of value was destroyed. She once remarked, "I always believed that if I gained weight, I was unlovable. She had suffered severe trauma from living with someone who was intoxicated and missing all the time. She seldom ever thought well of herself. Despite being worn out on the inside, she continued to smile for the cameras. Valerie started to confront the reality when Eddie passed away in 2020. She acknowledged that, despite their public persona, They led a very private life. They were not what they appeared to be, despite the media portraying them as the wild rocker and America's sweetheart. Despite their best efforts, the grief was evident everywhere. Later on, Valerie acknowledged that she held onto the hope of their marriage for too long. Years passed before it became apparent that it had been poisonous from the beginning. Peas. When Valerie Bertinelli entered the Hot in Cleveland audition room, she was 50 years old. Since Touched by an Angel concluded in 2003, she had not appeared on a television program on a regular basis. It had been 7 long years. The offers had stopped coming in. The spotlight was no longer there. It's no longer there. And now she was being invited to co-star with Betty White in a brand new comedy series. A living legend with more than 60 years of experience, Betty was 88 years old. Valerie felt frightened. Before filming, she spent nights awake, fearing that she had lost her edge, her spark, and her timing. She was often rehearsing, sometimes again recording her words to get one chuckle right. She felt sick to her stomach at the idea of making a mistake in front of Betty White. The show then made its debut on June 16, 2010. Not only did Hot in Cleveland endure, it took off. Each show drew around 2.5 million viewers. Those were numbers TV Land had never seen before. Valerie returned abruptly, but her nerves remained uneasy despite her triumph. The stakes were merely increased. Valerie was viewed as the mentor, despite Betty being the eldest cast member. Producers relied on her as the seasoned pro to set the tone. The major cast was completed by Wendy Malick and Jane Leaves, but Valerie's resume was the longest. She should have felt more confidence because of that. Rather, it broke her. Between scenes, she would disappear, hiding in her trailer and writing in her journal as she attempted to control the waves of panic episodes. She was 2 hours early for every table read, with scripts in hand, lines committed to memory, and everything practiced. For even a moment, she did not want to be caught off guard. The show was renewed for a second season, just 2 months after its debut. Valerie just felt pressure, even though that should have been excellent news. More episodes, more people watching her, and more opportunities to fail. There were 23 episodes in the first season, and that was only the start. At that moment, an unforeseen event occurred. She got to know a man. Tom Vitale was his name. It was the end of 2010. After a grueling 14-hour day of filming, Valerie had just concluded. She went to Aventura, Florida to eat by herself and relax at Wolfie Cohen's Rascal House. Tom went to greet her after noticing that she was sitting alone. He was not a Hollywood star. He was 44, a finance worker, and 6 years Valerie's junior. He was single. He was just interested in her, not in fame. 5 days later, they went on their first date. After 3 weeks, they couldn't be separated. Tom stood for all that her background did not. No drama, stability, and peace. Tom was a welcome change after a lifetime of tumultuous relationships and a 2007 divorce from Eddie Van Halen. They were already discussing marriage by Christmas. Why would you destroy someone you once loved and who you once loved in order to destroy all of your previous love for one another? Valerie and Tom were married in Malibu on January 1st, 2011. Only 100 people, compact, uncomplicated, and silent. Full. In stark contrast to her first wedding, which drew 300 guests and was a famous occasion. This time, she donned an off-the-rack garment that cost $800. No publicity, no designer. Eddie Van Halen even showed up with Wolfgang, their son. Everyone grinned. However, Valerie later acknowledged that the wedding felt hurried. It had only taken her 6 weeks to plan. She didn't want to think too much about it. All she needed was a normal feeling. She desired to feel at ease. This time, she wanted to show that she could do it correctly. Life did not slow down, however. It became more difficult, if anything. The schedule was harsh, and the second season of Hot in Cleveland was well underway. The majority of the days began before dawn. By 5:30 a.m., Valerie needed to be on set. Her departure time was 1:00 p.m. Each season had between 20 and 23 episodes, much more than she was accustomed to. Coffee wasn't giving her the energy she needed anymore. She then started taking caffeine tablets. 400-600 mg daily. It would be equivalent to consuming 6 strong glasses of coffee. Muted eye. Next were Red Bull and Monster energy drinks. Occasionally, 4 cans in a single day. Adderall comes next. It was initially recommended to help her concentrate, but it quickly turned into a crutch. She depended on it to finish scenes, remain witty, and remain sharp. Nobody was aware. She concealed everything. To keep her trailer stocked, her aide was instructed. Everything was timed by her. She would peep at the ideal time for filming, knowing when to take the tablets and when to consume the energy drinks. It was successful. She had perfect timing. But she knew the truth, yet her jokes worked. Under strain, and with the help of medications, she was striving not to break. On August 8, 2015, Valerie Bertinelli's reputation as a popular comedy performer started to change. The launch of Valerie's home cooking at that time signaled the start of an unexpected new phase in her life. The experiment was not limited to a single season. The popular program ran for 14 seasons and 157 episodes. In the same year, she began co-hosting the Kids Baking Championship alongside Duff Goldman. Valerie was suddenly more than just an actor. She frequently appeared on Food Network. Along with it came a sizable salary, up to $750,000 annually, just for hosting. So, viewers were transported to Valerie's kitchen by her cozy personal culinary technique. She prepared meals for her family and guests. She opened up, laughed, and smiled. It worked because it seemed genuine. She even won 2 daytime Emmys for the show. However, things had begun to shift by 2022. Priorities changed after Food Network and Warner Media merged. Cooking demonstrations were educational. Competition shows with high stakes were in. The adjustment did not sit well with Valerie. "I miss the days when the network taught people how to cook," she remarked on the internet. She claimed that it no longer seemed to be about learning. Valerie's home cuisine was discontinued by 2023. The show that had given her a fresh start abruptly ended. Valerie's private life was collapsing behind the scenes. After starting in 2011, her marriage to Tom Vitale had become poisonous. She later claimed that he was emotionally abusive and possessed narcissistic tendencies. She filed for divorce in May 2012. Tom retaliated by requesting $50,000 per month in support and attempting to nullify their prenuptial agreement. She continued to film Kids Baking Championship at the same time. She referred to that time frame as the apex year of hell. Despite the 8 agonizing months, she persisted. She arrived at work, breaking down off-camera in silence while grinning on camera. The divorce was finalized in November 2022. Earlier that year, Valerie gave Tom $2 million plus an additional $500,000. She said on social media that it was the second best day of her life after it was over. She spoke honestly and bluntly. Despite being crushed, she emerged stronger. She claimed that over that time, she had discovered more about her own resilience, forbearance, and value. Valerie was battling a silent battle while earning millions. Since childhood, she has had a distorted connection with food. She was once told to watch that by a 5th-grade teacher who prodded her belly. That stayed with her. She later acknowledged starving herself and exercising twice a day when she was hired as a Jenny Craig representative. She had had enough by her 60s. She started to completely reject diet culture and stopped weighing herself. She didn't care what the charts showed, writing in 2023, "This is a 150 lb body on a 5'4" frame. I don't weigh myself anymore." Peace was what she desired. That's what she desired. This new way of thinking was represented in her 2024 cookbook, Indulge. It was about not being afraid of food, but rather enjoying it. She had a bad ending to her time with Food Network. She signed a new contract in December 2021, but in January 2024, only a year later, he was kicked out of the Kids Baking Championship. According to some, her team's request for funds was excessive. Others said she never received an offer from the network. In any case, it stung that she was gone. During her divorce, she once said that the show saved her life. "It was like losing a lifeline when I lost it." Food Network was no longer the same. The shows that taught people how to cook, like Rachel Ray and Anna Garten, were something Valerie missed, but the new employers wanted drama, excitement, and fast-paced competitions. Then she experienced the unexpected grief. On October 6, 2020, her ex-husband Eddie Van Halen, who was the father of her son Wolfgang, passed away. He was only 65. Eddie's brother and second wife had been in the hospital with him every day, along with Wolfgang and Valerie. She hurried to the hospital when Wolfgang called her that morning and said, "His breathing has changed. I love you," was Eddie's final message to Valerie and Wolfgang. Then he vanished. She couldn't describe how much the loss affected her. She said that she had romanticized their history while being attacked online for mourning too much for an ex. She felt as though she had lost her soulmate despite the fact that the marriage had been filled with agony, drugs, and infidelity. It was a cruel divorce. From Tom Vitale. Valerie claims that they separated in 2019 after meeting in 2004 and getting married in 2011. According to Tom, it was 2021. In court, that time frame was important. The proceeds from Valerie's 2022 best-selling memoir, Enough Already, were used to support the legal battle. Tom disputed their prenuptial agreement. He desired spousal assistance. Valerie refused to give up. She later claimed that she stayed too long in both of her marriages, not just this one. She thought that if she loved deeply enough, it would be sufficient. No, it wasn't. The suffering didn't end there. Her father, Andrew, passed away in 2016. He was a consultant who assisted in the construction of the Channel Tunnel, a General Motors engineer, an Army veteran, and a good man. However, he began experiencing mild heart attacks around 2014. Then, when he was already in a doctor's office, a massive one struck. He then went into assisted living with Valerie's mother. A series of losses started with Andrew's passing. Valerie's loved ones continued to die. The sorrow simply accumulated. As if it weren't enough, she suffered greatly during menopause. It began at age 56 and continued for about 10 years. The symptoms were severe. She now chuckles at the bloopers she made on Hot in Cleveland because she was so distracted that she forgot lines. At the moment, though, it wasn't humorous. She had never experienced such intense emotional crashes. She still doesn't feel like herself at the age of 64. At one point, she questioned her physician about her mental health. Her realization that she wasn't alone was aided by the doctor's response. "I don't know." She started having candid conversations with other women in the hopes that her candor would make someone else feel less isolated. Valerie Bertinelli had spent decades trying to convince everyone that her life was picture perfect. She was America's sweetheart, appearing on magazine covers, peddling weight loss products, and grinning on red carpets while married to rock icon Eddie Van Halen. However, everything changed in 2022. That perception was brutally destroyed by her memoir, Enough Already. At the age of 20, she said, she fell in love with Eddie, but their relationship soon descended into a tangle of infidelity, drugs, and alcohol. She held on to the delusion that they were soulmates for years. She even acknowledged that she had created a fiction about their marriage in her head that was far different from the reality. Despite their 2007 divorce, Valerie continued to act as though nothing had happened. Even though they hadn't lived together for 20 years, she was still so engrossed in that old fantasy when Eddie passed away in 2020 that she put herself in the shoes of the distraught widow. The fans were taken aback. She was married to a man who made her feel unwelcome for 25 years. Nevertheless, she portrayed herself as the contented wife in public. Readers were struck hard by that degree of unadulterated vulnerability. It wasn't just another tell-all about celebrities. It was an agonizing examination of how denial, addiction, and celebrity can distort reality. If that wasn't enough, Valerie went one step farther and abandoned her weight, which had been a defining characteristic of her for years. Nearly everyone was taken aback by her decision at the age of 64. She stopped dieting. She ceased weighing herself. She gave up trying to find the ideal number. This came from a woman who had been a spokesman for Jenny Craig, had appeared on national television in a bikini at the age of 48, and had shed 50 pounds to appear on the cover of People magazine in 2009. But behind the scenes, she had been caught in a vicious cycle of constraint and obsession. She repeatedly attempted to lose the same 10 pounds. Something changed when she finished writing her memoir. She claimed that her mental health improved practically immediately after she stopped using the scale. She discovered that her years of dieting had not made her feel at peace. She gave up drinking and participated in Dry January in 2023. Naturally, the weight began to drop, but she had lost interest in that. She shed about 30 to 40 pounds by 2025, not by dieting, but through healing. Flowen. When she stopped worrying about figures and began paying attention to her body, she demonstrated that real change had occurred.